A very good evening to all our viewers. As you know, we have been at ground zero in Jammu and in Punjab. At this moment, we are between Jammu and Phagwara, somewhere on the highway, and we will continue to bring you reports from the ground. As you know, Jammu, Punjab have been in many ways the epicenter of the escalating military tensions between India and Pakistan for the last some days. An update before we start: the Prime Minister has made it clear to all concerned, the security agencies and the military, that A, Operation Sindoor is still on, and B, वहां से गोली चलेगी तो यहां से गोला चलेगा. This happened after Pakistan broke the understanding reached between the two Director Generals of Military Operations that was suddenly announced on Saturday evening. But within 2 hours of that announcement, Pakistan broke that ceasefire and loud explosions were heard in Srinagar. Drone attacks had to be repelled at several places in Jammu and Kashmir. A drone flew over the place where I was hosting the show from in Jammu. And let's give you a sense of how Pakistan broke the ceasefire. This is what was heard in Srinagar. Now, it's been a pretty surreal 24 hours. Saturday morning for me and for many people in Jammu began with the sound of explosions. That was 5 a.m. When I ran out, I found that residential colonies in Jammu had taken the hit from Pakistani drones as they were intercepted by India's air defense system. Among targets was actually a temple. If we can move to that picture now, the Aap Shambhu temple in Jammu, not just a few steps from that temple, the roof of a home was blasted away. There you can see that image. And at about 5 p.m. in the evening, when I was at a border village in Jammu, and I was being shown shells like the one you see on your screen that had landed just at 5 in the morning that same day, came the dramatic post from Donald Trump claiming that he had brokered the ceasefire between India and Pakistan with immediate effect. That is not what the Indian announcement said. Indian Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, while making that announcement, said that this was as a result of a conversation between the two Director Generals of Military Operations. Then we began decoding the ceasefire. But within 2 hours of the ceasefire came the visual evidence, including where I was sitting, that Pakistan had broken the ceasefire. Now we have news from ANI that the Modi government has said that Operation Sindoor is not over and the army commanders have been given a free hand to respond to any violations as they deem fit. A lot of details are coming out, but one of the most powerful moments, that's Prime Minister Modi holding a high-level security meeting today, but one of the most powerful moments in the last few days has been how India has spoken as one. Several opposition leaders have been at the front line of putting India's message to the world, and I would say key among them is Congress Member of Parliament, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, who of course has been a former diplomat himself. Let's introduce our newsmaker on the program today as we continue to track many of these developments from the ground. Shashi, it's good to see you. Let me start by asking you how you feel at being described as literally the face of India, alongside, of course, our very brilliant diplomats on global stage. I mean, you're on the other side of the political trenches, but you have made a very, very powerful articulation on behalf of India. I followed much of it. We'll play out a clip, in fact, after your first comment. But how do you see all this attention on Shashi Tharoor speaking for India?
Barkha, I'm an Indian first and foremost, and everything else follows. You know, we all have multiple identities, but above all, these identities are possible and safe and secure because I'm Indian. I mean, that's the sheltering carapace under which I'm also everything else that I might be. And therefore, for me, when it's a question of my country's national security, nothing comes ahead of that. And I'm very, very proud to respond when people ask me to speak. I wasn't asked by the government to do that. I was asked by channels around the world who wanted an Indian voice, and I understood the importance of putting across our point of view in many of these audiences. And I'm very pleased that those people at home, and more important, perhaps those people abroad who've seen it, have got the message.
Do you think that your former life as a career diplomat had something to do with how you were able to handle, some of the usual Western cliches that were thrown your way when you had to go on all these channels?
You know, Barkha, I wasn't actually a career diplomat for India. I'm honored to have been considered.
Oh, right. Sorry. A former UN diplomat. What's wrong with me? The fog of war is getting to me. Yeah.
I think the only thing is, in the process of working for the UN for 29 years, I learned how to speak to international audiences. In fact, the UN often asked me to do so. I was the guy who got wheeled out on all the tough occasions, BBC Hard Talk or Fox News in America when they were hostile to the UN. The person who was sent out to talk to them by the UN was very often me. And so I had done a lot of that, and I'd had some experience of how to reach out to people who don't necessarily start out sympathetic to you, but if you know how to reach them and do so with the telling arguments, the ones that really have the greatest effect, then you make your side's case better. And I was able, touch wood, to be able to do that with some audiences, not with all. There are some who their minds already made up. And with them, it's very difficult to get a word in edgeways. I've had that experience with the BBC. But with others, on the other hand, as long as they're willing to listen, I'm willing to tell them how we see things. And I think that in the end, this is very important, because while our brave soldiers are fighting the war in the front lines and our civilians are bearing the brunt of the Pakistani attacks, there is a global narrative where we aren't necessarily doing as well as we would like, because the Pakistanis have somehow managed to sell to a lot of people the notion that they are innocent victims of an unprovoked attack by India, that they were blameless in Pahalgam, that India is just finding them as a convenient scapegoat, and so on. And many people, oddly enough, with historical amnesia, forgetting that Pakistan similarly denied any knowledge of 26/11, similarly denied any knowledge of where bin Laden was, all the long list of denials where Pakistan has been proven time after time after time to be misleading the world. Those are forgotten, and once again, people are willing to let Pakistan mislead them. It becomes very important then for us to stand up and set the record straight. I'm glad that I was able to play my part, my small part, in doing so.
In fact, I think the phrase you used is that Pakistan is a master of denial. I want to just play out one of those clips where I think you spoke so compellingly. Let's take a look.
Is concerned, don't forget that Pakistan is a master of denial. They denied having anything to do with the Mumbai attacks that killed 170 people on 26/11/2008 until one of the terrorists was caught alive, and the Pakistanis had to admit that he and everything he said came from them. They deny even knowing where Osama bin Laden was until he was found in a military encampment not far from a Pakistani army base inside Pakistan. This is the Pakistani route. It's constantly show us the evidence. Well, I mean, the fact is there is enough circumstantial evidence and there are intelligence intercepts on the basis of which India is acting. And India has absolutely no other reason to do this. Let's understand something very clearly, Tom. India is a status quo power. It wants nothing that Pakistan has. It is focused on growing its economy, improving its high technology, providing a future for its young people. It is entirely happy to be left alone by Pakistan, and it'll leave Pakistan alone. Pakistan is a revisionist power. It claims territory India holds. It is a bigoted power that wishes to take over parts of India on the grounds that the people living there happen to share the same religion.
Now, Shashi, you spoke about, the preconceived notions that Western media often has and how you've tried to battle some of them. But Western governments have these misconceptions as well. And they continue to cast India's battle against terrorism in some sort of ignorant, misplaced understanding of a dispute, the biggest offender in this is Donald Trump, right? And the reason that it matters and it would not normally matter is because the American president was the first to announce that hostilities between India and Pakistan were going to cease. And he calls it a ceasefire. India has not used that word. He says he mediated it. And he keeps, for some bizarre reason, referring to a battle that goes back thousands of years. I have no idea who's briefed him or who's not briefed him. How concerned should we be with Trump's bizarre comments?
No, I think it really, these are bizarre comments. You're quite right, Barkha. It's very clearly the product of somebody who either doesn't get briefed or doesn't absorb his briefings very well. There are American officials, even in this administration, who understand the situation far better. In fact, the designated future Assistant Secretary of State for South Asia is a gentleman I've met, S. Paul Kapoor, who is actually an Indian American, part Indian American origin, and somebody who has written knowledgeable books about South Asia, is a professor of strategic studies, and understands exactly why everything Donald Trump said would only make a thoughtful American squirm with embarrassment. Number one, you do not give Pakistan credit after having allowed them essentially to trigger off an unnecessary conflict causing vast loss of life through a terrorist attack. Second, you do not promote equivalence between the victim and the perpetrator. You do not promote equivalence between Pakistan and India. Third, you do not speak about 1,000 years of conflict when the entire country of Pakistan and the dispute have only existed for 77 years. Fourth, you do not go around claiming credit for mediation when India has consistently rejected mediation, and there is no evidence whatsoever that any sort of formal mediation process was ever undertaken. In other words, there's nothing right about this message from President Trump. And it just shows me that either he just doesn't have enough appointees around him who can tell him what the implications are, or he just doesn't absorb what he's told. I mean, it's just, I think, frankly, anybody in a position of this kind of authority who conducts world affairs on social media cannot be taken seriously. And we certainly are not going to be allowing ourselves, I think, to be influenced by what he says on social media in governing anything substantive that we do. Our national interest is our national interest, and we will pursue it. I'm convinced, whoever the government is, we will pursue our national interest regardless of what Mr. Trump may or may not say.
You know, you're chuckling a bit about Trump because he's so ignorant. But the fact is, he's still the world's most powerful man. And the fact also is that he made the announcement maybe 5 minutes before India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri came out to speak. There's also a very important distinction in nomenclature. India used the word understanding. Trump used the word ceasefire. He has doubled down on the use of that word today. He has made no mention of the fact that Pakistan blatantly violated, whether you want to call it a ceasefire or an understanding. And today we have word from the government that Operation Sindoor is still ongoing. Rahul Gandhi has asked for a special session of parliament to be convened to discuss Operation Sindoor, the Pahalgam Terror Attack. And his letter also mentions Trump speaking, he references Trump speaking before the government. Are you concerned that Donald Trump spoke before the government did, and Pakistan might jump on that to seek to do what they've always done, to try and internationalize their relations with India? Hang on, Shashi, I can't hear you. Hang on, I can't hear you. Can you unmute? Yeah, now I can.
Yeah, I believe your side had muted my mic, Barkha. I'm sorry. I should say that, yes, that was one of the objectives of the Pahalgam terror attack, was to once again re-internationalize the Kashmir dispute and once again to re-hyphenate India and Pakistan. This is something which we had successfully moved away from, and we had successfully moved away from under previous American administrations. So it's rather unfortunate that Mr. Trump has fallen right into the Pakistani trap. I certainly, as an Indian, would never want to see Pakistan rewarded for its outrageous terrorist attack, and would not want to see Pakistan rewarded for its egregious military violations thereafter, including the violations after the ceasefire that was announced by President Trump. So from my point of view, Anything that rewards Pakistan in terms of talks, in terms of mediation, in terms of internationalizing the dispute, quote unquote, all of that is unacceptable to me, and I dare say would be unacceptable to the government of India. I can't speak for the government of India, but I can't believe they would accept it. As far as Prime Minister Modi's comment that Operation Sindoor is on, I think what he meant, and I think we all understand this, is that we were never the ones that were trying to prolong this conflict. But if Pakistan hits us, we'll hit them back, and we'll hit them back hard. I think that message was given throughout every single one of the 3-4 days of this conflict. And that message has to continue to be given. That's what he means. I don't think he's implying that we're going to be conducting any offensive military operations. First of all, that's not in our nature. And secondly, there is nothing to be gained by so doing. We are basically saying we are completely on alert. We haven't wound up, disbanded, sent our people home, restored the leaves we had cancelled or whatever. We have just said to people, stand by. If the Pakistanis behave, we'll also behave. If the Pakistanis misbehave, we know how to give it back to them good and proper.
One of the comments that you made, I think at the launch of your book, which I'm hoping to be able to sit down and talk to you about separately, you said 2025 is not 1971. And to draw a kind of analogy from the war that birthed Bangladesh and what is happening today would not be accurate. What did you mean?
No, it was simply a specific question about shouldn't we have carried on fighting as we did in 71 and sort of redrawn the map kind of thing. And I think that's simply not a realistic objective today by comparison with what was done in 71. As a patriotic Indian, and I was a schoolboy at the time, I can tell you how proud we all were by what are the lightning strike conducted by our forces and the successful victory over Pakistan in that 17-day war that created Bangladesh and made it a free country. But those circumstances do not exist today. There is no transcendent moral cause. There is no separate geographical area to free. There is no logistical disadvantage to Pakistan of having half a subcontinent to cross to supply its forces. There's now much higher technological support being given to it by countries like China and Turkey. Turkey is reported to have given them 4,000 drones. May have been small ones, but we had to expend ammunition in taking them down. China is supposed to have given them sophisticated generation 4.5 J-10 fighters and highly sophisticated PL-15 missiles. This is a different world. I mean, I'm not talking about India being unable to cope with all of this. Of course we can cope with it. We can fight it. But the question is, it's not as if we could suddenly go and sort of, cut Pakistan in half or whatever it is that these fantasists are implying. It makes no sense to say that. 71 was a great achievement. We should be proud of it, and it'll always be a shining moment in our history. 2025 is a different story, different episode, different circumstances. And as far as I'm concerned, they don't need to be compared at all, nor should one necessarily point the way to the other.
But I have a question for you. There are many people in the BJP's own support base who have some disquiet about the sudden, to them it seems sudden, the sudden announcement of a halt in hostilities. Remember Saturday, and I can say this because, I've been in Jammu and Punjab. Saturday began with Pakistan drones intercepted over residential colonies, over a temple. A missile was intercepted in Haryana. Kamikaze drones were taken down over Amritsar. Not just were our airstrips and our airfields targeted. Now you had homes like this. I found this image very powerful because the roof was blown away, but the flag was not. And I thought that was a very powerful image for me personally. Yes. So I just wanted to share it. But even former Army Chief General Malik led the troops in the Kargil war. He had a tweet today, if I can bring it up, and he said, people may ask, let me read it out. We have left India's future history to ask what political strategic advantage, if any, was gained after its kinetic and non-kinetic actions post Pakistan's horrific terror strike in Pahalgam. What do you think? Do you think the timing, the day this happened, that, is this something that needed to be explained more to people? Do you agree that a parliament session is needed? How do you see it?
Yeah, so these are two different things. First, on General Malik, whom I know and like and respect enormously, if he had asked me the same question, my answer would be, look, I think, General Sahab, that what we have achieved is we've sent a very clear signal that every terrorist action will be met by a fitting and if you like, disproportionate reaction. We have shown this now, where by hitting Bahawalpur, by hitting Muridke, by hitting other terror camps, 9 camps across Pakistan, including in the Punjabi heartland. And so we have basically said, look, no holds are barred. This is not the days of Kargil when we lost lives trying not to cross the LOC when fighting back against Pakistan. Those days are over. We'll cross the LOC, we'll cross the international border, we will do whatever we need to do to send a message. So that's, I think, the message we have conveyed, and I believe that kinetic action was essential. As you probably remember, before it was undertaken, I advocated a kinetic action. So that is my view as to why it was necessary and why it was the right thing to do. I would certainly feel that the ceasefire, whether it was today, yesterday, or tomorrow, the ceasefire was also appropriate, because I don't think that India had anything to gain from a prolongation of hostilities. We are not around to kill Pakistani civilians for no reason, and we don't have to behave like the worst of the people on the other side. So we were saying to the Pakistanis, look, we've hit you because we had a message to send to your terrorists. We've sent that. Now, if you want to respond, be prepared for a response from us. We gave them that response. When they decided they'd had enough, and I think certainly having seen their air bases hit very hard by us, would have probably taught them a lesson that this was enough is enough. And they reached out at 3:35 yesterday afternoon. We're told their Director General of Military Operations called us and said, shall we call it off at 5? I don't think our people would have taken a minute to say, yes, fine, let's call it off, because we were never the belligerents. We were never the ones who wanted to have a long war. So on this, to my mind, the messaging was clear. If it wasn't clear to everyone in our country and it wasn't clear to the entire world, we ought to make it clear. That is certainly the first thing. On the question of a parliament session, obviously, as a Congress member, I don't dissent from my party's request. I'm assuming that what was intended all along was that the government should be given an opportunity to take the nation into confidence through its elected representatives as to everything that happened. I think some details will require further investigation on the part of the government in the government's own interest. They need to figure out what went wrong in Pahalgam. They need to find out what worked and what didn't work in the military operations. All of those internal postmortems they will need to do. But for the purpose of the confidence of the nation, talking to Parliament about what it understands so far, what it did, what it didn't do, I don't think is a bad idea at all. I recall as a student of history that in 1962, during the China War, Prime Minister Nehru held a parliament session in which he was accountable not just to the opposition, but those were the days before the anti-defection law when people could criticize him from within his own party. And he got some tough questions from Congress MPs also, and he took them. So I think it's not a bad idea. But again, that is as they say in the American military, that's above my pay grade. The request has been made. The answer is in the hands of the government. Let's see what they do.
By the way, the images that you're seeing on your screen are now images of those air bases in Pakistan having been hit. The runway of Rahim Yar Khan Air Base in Pakistan was totally flattened. These are now, these were speculative reports, but they're now being confirmed more and more officially. And those are some of the images of those flattened air bases. So I guess what I'm hearing you say, one, a parliament session would be a good idea. Why not? But two, I want to take you back to what you said. You said a ceasefire, whether today, tomorrow, or day after, is appropriate. One of the other things you said, I think, in that Al Arabiya interview, we do not want anything that Pakistan has. A very powerful statement there. But then, doesn't the timing of the ceasefire matter? People might ask, does it have to be on the day that a missile was intercepted in Haryana, that drone attacks were intercepted over residential colonies? Does the timing not matter? Or do you think that since it was coming and India had done what we needed to, it's okay, let's get on with our country, our route, our aspirations, and not be bogged down by a Pakistan-provoked conflict?
That's right. So you answered the question perfectly yourself, Barkha. How many more roofs do you want to see blown off? How many more children do you want to see killed? How many more people do you want to see rushed to hospital in places like Poonch and Jammu? I'm sorry. For me, every day that there isn't a killing going on is better than a day where there is killing going on. I just felt that violence was sadly necessary because of the terrorist attack. But I am very pleased that there is no more killing and no more war at this moment. Look, I genuinely meant what I said to those international audiences. We want to be allowed to get on with our development, with our growth, with the prosperity and well-being of our people. Even our elections are all fought about benefits for people, who gets what, which women are going to get free bus rides, and which people are getting grain, and who's going to get what jobs. And, we are focused very much on the well-being of our people. That's the kind of country we are. We're not focused, it seems to me anyway, on wasting time on military aggrandizement and lofty ambitions to capture somebody else's territory and so on. That's not what India is all about. Let's get on with being India, and let the others too in their own misfortunes.
Let me ask you in the end, though, there's just one problem with your formulation, and that problem is asymmetric war, right? I'm not a warmonger, you're not a warmonger. I think soldiers in particular are not warmongers because they pay with their lives. But Pakistan, we walk away from this, we've drawn a new red line, we're trying to establish deterrence. We have said, look, if you do this, we'll do this. But Pakistan uses terrorism to fight us. And therefore, when you talk about the roofs being blown off and the children killed, as we saw in Pahalgam, God forbid, can happen again. And if the world keeps positioning it as some dispute over Kashmir, there's a problem.
There is a problem. There's one advantage that the Pakistanis have in this framing, that in theory, anytime they want to re-internationalize the issue, anytime they want the world's attention, they can simply send terrorists across the border. Pahalgam was very meticulously planned, and I believe the timing too was deliberate. It fits into a lot of Pakistani agendas. It fitted into the timing, for example, just before the IMF loan was to be discussed. They got $1 billion yesterday, $1.3 billion. You're looking at a situation where the Pakistanis had already shored up their military equipment in the event of Indian reprisals. That had been arranged. You had also got a situation where the military was incredibly conscious of its own growing unpopularity. Their own puppet government had been unable to revive Pakistan's stagnating economy. They needed a distraction very badly. And so we are always the handy whipping boy. We are always the people. Go kill a few Indians and we'll get all of the distraction we want. That is unfortunately one of the vulnerabilities we have from being next door to this failed state, this rogue state of Pakistan. But we have no choice. We can't wish them away. What we have to do is to really redouble our security efforts to ensure that the next time they try a stunt like this, we foil it before it happens. That we cannot afford complacency. We're going to constantly have to be on the alert. But we can't give these people a moral victory. I'd like to see tourism resume in Kashmir. I'd like to see the Kashmiri economy booming again. I'd like to see Kashmiris welcoming Indians with open arms from all over the country. I'd like to see Kashmiris feeling welcome all over the rest of India, whether in university campuses or in the shops they're running or in businesses. I'd like to see the integration, and not just the territorial integration, but the emotional integration of the people of Kashmir with the people of the rest of India to proceed. And the more we do that, the more difficult it becomes for Pakistan to push their failed narrative. But right now, you are totally right, Barkha. There is that vulnerability. And I'm sorry to say, it is going, sadly, to remain. It's not something that's going to disappear. We just have to be on our guard and on our alert. That's the price we pay, the continuing price we pay for partition and the existence of this militarized Islamist rogue state next door to us.
Just a final question. A lot of debate about, what happens now. By the way, we now have Yogi Adityanath saying that Ramos was used in this operation. He said this at an event where the defense minister was present. So that's a detail that has been sort of said by someone publicly out there today. So that's one important point. The second is a lot of debate over the people of Pakistan not being the people who want to punish, but should that extend to going back to cricket tournaments where Pakistanis face off with India. The Indus Water Treaty, I know, is going to remain in abeyance, but two unrelated questions really. Do you believe that in this new normal, we have to re-examine sporting relationships? Question one, because I know you're a cricket lover. And two, Do you have concerns about how this is going to play out on the global stage with the details that are emerging, for example, as using hypersonic BrahMos missile?
Look, I don't know about the BrahMos, and certainly I wouldn't consider the Chief Minister of UP to be the most appropriate source for that confirmation. And maybe this is something the government can tell Parliament in the special session that has been requested, because we should know, I suppose, now that that Yogi Adityanath has made such a claim, we should know whether it's accurate or not. But we should hear it from people who actually deal with this kind of stuff. And certainly, if it worked and it worked well, that's a feather in our defense establishment's cap, and we should all be happy about it. On the question of the normal relationship in sporting and so on, let's face it, Barkha, we have not had a normal relationship for some years. In fact, there wasn't much normality in the relationship after 26/11, that is after 2008. We haven't had much serious cooperative sporting relations with Pakistan, except in international tournaments. And the reason we play them in international tournaments is because we would forfeit points if we didn't. Matches we could have won, we would needlessly get zero by refusing to play Pakistan, so we play them. And so far, by and large, we've beaten them more often than we haven't. Otherwise, we don't really have any normal. We have had no bilateral tours of Pakistan for ages. They haven't come here. We haven't gone there. We don't have Pakistani players in the IPL. When I chaired the Foreign Affairs Committee the first time, 2014 to 19 in Parliament, in our report, we actually supported the government's disinclination to talk to the Pakistani civilian government, because it was very clear the civilian government couldn't control the people with the guns. There's no point making peace with people who can't keep their word, because they don't control the military in Pakistan who break the peace. And therefore, we all sympathize with the government's decision not to talk to the civilian government or the military government. But we did suggest that the time had come to seriously explore more people-to-people relations. That is, contacts amongst ordinary citizens, and perhaps a genuine opening up of visas to selected categories of people, whether it's business people, tourists, maybe sports people, entertainers, musicians, separated families, medical tourism, all of that. Now, that was not happening much, but it was happening modestly. I mean, the very fact that there were Pakistani citizens whom India had to expel when they decided to expel them after Pahalgam, the very fact that there were Indian citizens in Pakistan whom Pakistan had to expel, shows there was some of that happening. That's no longer happening. In my own view, right now, there will be no progress in the short term towards any of that. And that's partially because there is an understandable disinclination on New Delhi's part to reward Pakistan in any way, shape, or form for its terrorist outrage and for what followed. But in due course, I have said in the past that simply not talking is not much of a policy. We have to have something. And therefore, I think eventually, if there is continued peace, if there are no more terror attacks, if Pakistan shows some genuine inclination to put the terrorists in their place or dismantle or not rebuild their infrastructure, all of those things, it is possible that we can sort of start gradually opening up. And the areas I would suggest are the same ones my committee suggested a few years ago, 6 years ago, in its report, which is people-to-people contact, some trade, and some gradual opening up of human interactions across the border. But it'll be a long time, I fear, before we're going to be able to talk government to government, not least because in Pakistan's case, the government you're talking to doesn't actually control the country. It's the people in the shadows with the guns, controlling the fanatics, controlling the terrorist bombers. They're the ones who hold the keys to war and peace in their hands. And therefore, since we're not going to talk to them directly, talking to the patsies whom they have propped up as puppets in front of them doesn't do much good either. So I'm sorry to say that isn't going to happen for a while. And if it does, I'd be one of the most surprised people on the opposition benches.
Exactly. I love that line, by the way. Talking to the patsies or puppets is not a great idea. And therefore, all the many ifs that you just listed, I think it's going to take a while before any of that changes. Shashi, will let you go. You know, you have a busy lineup. Thank you so much. And thank you from all Indians for being such an eloquent voice for our country on the global stage. Thank you and take care, Shashi.
Thank you, Barkha. All the best.
Thank you. And that is it on this edition from Ground Zero by Shashi. We will have much more coming up shortly. Take care and see you soon.
You want to exit? Oh, sorry, I don't know.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.